We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Dalet Amud Aleph and Maseches Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 64a. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof that Bnei Yisrael, the Klal Yisrael, when they worshipped Avodah Zarah, it was for the sake of the Avodah Zarah, because the Gemara said in the previous Amud that it was really because they intended in committing adultery or other illicit relationships. And so the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a brais. So the brais is talking about a situation where there was a child that was starving that Eliyahu HaNavi saw in the street. And Eliyahu HaNavi said to the child, if you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, then you'll be able to live. And the child now responds, Has, you should be silent, Shelo lahazkir b'shem Hashem, not to mention the name of Hashem, Shelo limdu aviv v'imo, because his father and his mother had never taught him the name of Hashem. This child didn't want to mention the name of Hashem because he was raised worshipping Avodah Zarah. Miyad hotzi yeraso mecheko mechabiko menashka. Immediately he took out the idol that he worshipped. He took it out from his lap and he hugged it and he kissed it at shenivka kreso until his stomach burst forth. V'nafla yeraso la'aretz, and then the idol, it fell to the ground. V'nafal hu aleh, and he fell on top of it. L'kayim mashenemar, and that fulfills what is said in the pasuk. This is the pasuk that was brought in the previous amid. V'nasati pigreichem al pigrei gilulechem, that your carcasses will be on top of the carcasses of your idol. And so again, it seems from here that they worship the Avodah Zarah for its own sake. And the Gemara answers this is not necessarily a proof. This is the same answer given as was given on the previous amid. Basar ta'aviku bey, after they already got attached to Avodah Zarah, so then they began to worship Avodah Zarah for its own sake. But the point on the previous amud was that initially they worshipped the Avodah Zarah because of their desire for illicit relationships. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here another proof. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Nehemiah, Vayizaku b'kol gadol al Hashem Elokeim. It says they screamed out to Hashem. My Omer, what is being said? Amar Rav Yehuda v'yiteimer Rav Yonasan. Rav Yehuda says, and some say, Rav Yonasan says, Bai bai hainu da'achrav lebeisei. They were crying out. This is why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. V'kalya lehechala, and this is why the Beis Hamikdash, the Heichal, was burned. V'katalinu letzadike, and the righteous had been killed. V'aglinu liyisrael me'arayu, and Klal Yisrael has been exiled from its land. V'adayin hu meraked beinon, and still the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, it dances among us. Klum yehavite lon ela lekivule be'agru. The only reason you gave us this Yetzer Hara for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says the people, is in order that we should receive reward. Lo iu ba'inan, we don't want it. We don't want the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. V'lo agre ba'inan, and we don't want its reward either. And so again, it seems that they were worshipping the Avodah Zarah for the sake of the Avodah Zarah. They had a Yetzer Hara for the Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara again answers, Basar da'aviku bey. This also was already after they had become attached to the Aveira of Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara continues the story. Yasvu talasa yoma b'tanisa. They then sat for 3 days fasting. Bo rachme, and they davened. Nafaluhu piska merakin. A note came down from heaven to have a ksiv ba emes, and it was written on the note the word emes. Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina says, Shema mino. You see from this chosamo shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes, that the signature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes. Nafa kegurya denura mi beis kodshe hakadoshim. A fiery lion cub then came out of the Kodesh Kadoshim. Amar luhu navi li Yisrael, and the navi said to Klal Yisrael, Hainu Yitzra the Avodah Zarah, that is the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. Bahadid to Katafsi lei ishtamet binisamine, when they were grabbing it, the hair fell from it. V'yazal kalya ba'arba mea parse, and it screamed so loud that its voice went. It was heard from 400 parsas away. Amru, they said, Hechi ne'avid, what should we do? Dilma mishmayim erach me'olem, maybe from Shemayim it will have mercy on it, on this Yetzer Hara. Amar lehu navi, so the navi said to them, Shadyu beduda da'avra v'chasyua bi'avra. What you should do is put it into a vessel of lead, and you should seal it with lead. The shayif kali, that will make the sound. You won't be able to hear the sound. It will keep the sound in. The chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, this is the pasuk in Zechariah, vayomer zosarisha vayashlech osa el tocha efa. It says that they threw it inside the efa, inside the measure, vayashlech so evan hoferes alpia, and then they put the lead at the opening. And Amrian, so then they said, hoel ve'es ratzon, who, since this seems to be an eis ratzon where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is listening to us, ni boy rachme yitzra de'avera, we should also daven that the Yetzer Hara for Aveira, for illicit relationships, that should also go away. Bo Rachamin, so they daven, and Imser Biadayu, that also was given over to them. Chavshu Talasa Yume, and they bound it up for 3 days. And Ibo Beyasa Basiyom Malachol, and then they needed an egg that was 1 day old for the sick. Velo Ashkachu, but they couldn't find, because the chickens as well, they were not reproducing, because there was no Yetzer Hara for relationships. Amru, so they said, Hechi Nabid, they said, what should we do? Niboy Palga, if we're just going to ask for half, that half of it should go away, only the bad, so to speak, and not the good. So Palga Merakia Lo Yahavi, from the heavens, they're not going to give half. So instead what they did was, Kachlinhu La'ene They gouged out its eyes, a hanibe, and that was effective. The lo igri inish bekrov, say that a person would not have the desire to be together with his relatives. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Maisa ben Achar Sachas, there was an incident with a certain non-Jewish woman. Shaisa chola bioser, she was very sick. Amra, she said, Im tamur isha, if this woman, if she recovers, referring to herself, if she recovers, mechola, if she recovers from her illness, Teilech v'tavod l'chol avodah zarah sheba'olam, she's going to go and she'll serve every avodah zarah in the world. The person said that if I am healed, I'll go serve every avodah zarah in the world. So Amda, so she indeed did recover, v'avda l'chol avodah zarah sheba'olam, and she worshipped every avodah zarah in the world. Kevan shehigia le'Peor, and when she got to the avodah zarah of Peor, sh'ala l'komrim, she asked the priests of Peor, b'ameh ovdin lazu, how do we worship? How does one worship Peor? Amrullah, they said to her, ochlin teradin v'shos and sheichar. They said you have to eat spinach and you drink beer, umatarizin b'faneh, and then you defecate in front of the idol. Amra, she said, mutav shetachzar ahu isha l'cholia. It's better that this woman should go back to her illness. V'lo tavod avodah zarah b'kach. She shouldn't serve an avodah zarah in this fashion. But atem beis Yisrael, but you Klal Yisrael einon kain. You're not like this woman. You're worse. Hanitzmadim lebal Peor, because it says that the Klal Yisrael was nitzmadim to Baal Peor. What does that mean? Nitzmadim kitsamid pasal. It's like the cover of a vessel that's tightly attached. You were tightly bound to the idol Baal Peor. V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem, and then with regards to Hashem, it says you were deveikim. What's deveikim mean? Kishtei tomorrow. So that's just like two dates. Hadvuka zu bezu. They're touching one another. They're not really attached. Your attachment to Baal Peor was greater than your attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Gemara says, b'masnisa ton, in the Brisa was taught the exact opposite. Hanitzmadim leval Peor. What does it mean? Hanitzmadim leval Peor. Kitsamid al yedei isha. It's like a bracelet on the hand of a woman, which is not very tightly bound. It's loose. But v'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem. But when it says you're deveikim b'Hashem, devukim mamish, that means you are mamish. You're actually attached. And so it's the opposite conclusion. There's more of an attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Maisa b'Savta ben Alos shehisker chamoro l'nochris achas. There was an incident with Savta ben Alos that he rented out his donkey and his services to a particular non-Jewish woman. Kevan shehigia lePeor, when she reached the idol Peor, Amrlo, she said to him, Hamtein ad sheikonis, wait until I enter, ve'etze, and then I'll come out. After she left, Amar Lo, then he said to her, Af at hamtini ad sheikonis ve'etze, you also wait until I go in and I'll come out. Amar Lo, so she said to him, V'lo Yehudiyat, but aren't you Jewish? Why are you worshipping this avodah zarah? Amar Lo, he said to her, Ma yichbis lach, what do you care? Nechnas par befanav, so he went in there and he defecated in front of it. V'kinech bechotman, he wiped himself on its nose. V'hayu mishar se avodah zarah mekalsin lo, he thought he was shaming the avodah zarah, but those who served the avodah zarah, the priests of the avodah zarah, they started to praise him. V'yomrim, they said, Me'olam lo haya adam sha'avdu lazu bekach. There never has been a person who worshipped this idol in this manner. They praised him for his innovative worship of the avodah zarah. And the Gemara says, "Hapoer atzmo leval Peor." If somebody defecates in front of Baal Peor, hareza avodaso, that is considered serving it. Afagav demechavin lebizo, even though the person's intention is to shame, is to humiliate, is to degrade the idol. Still, it's still considered to be serving the avodah zarah. And similarly, hazorek even lemarkulis. If somebody throws a stone at markulis, zui avodaso, that also is considered the worship of the idol markulis. Afagav demechavin lemirgame, even though the person's intention might be to stone the idol. And Rashi explains, Savtoi Shem Yehudihu, the name Savtoi, that's the name of a Jew. Ben Alos, the Mesoras Hashas says that Rashi may have had the girsa min Alos, from Alos. Besamech, first of all, Rashi says it's with a Samech. V'Shem Mokom, who, and this was actually the name of a place. It wasn't that his name was Savtoi Ben Alos, but rather he was Savtoi from this place called Alos. V'Kinech Bechot Moshel Peor, again he wiped himself on the nose of Peor. Mekalsin Mishavchin, Mekalsin means they praised him. V'Afagav Demecham and Lebizo, even though his intention is that he wants to degrade the avodah zarah, chayev carbon al shegagaso. He's still chayev a carbon for his mistake. V'im hisrubon, if they warn him about it, chayev misa, he would be liable to the death penalty. And the Gemara continues, Rav Menashe have a kazul of Beit Torsa. Rav Menashe was going to Beit Torsa. Amrulo, they said to him, avodah zarah hi dekai hacha, there's an avodah zarah over here. Shakal pisa shadabe, so he took a stone and he threw it at it. Amrulo, they said to him, markulisi, that's the idol markulis, and that's actually the way you worship it, by throwing the stone, you were actually worshiping it. Amar lahu, so he said to them, hazorek even lamarkulis tanan, the Mishnah says, you have to be throwing it, and Rashi explains what he meant to say was lamarkulis tanan, lefon of lechavdo, you're throwing in front of the idol markulis in order to honor, to accord it honor. V'ani zarakti lahakos begufa, but I threw it at the actual idol in order to hit it on its body, and so therefore what I did was not actually worshiping the idol. That's what he said to them. Asa shal be midrasha, but then he came and he asked this question in the Beis Medrash. Amrulei, they said to him, Azorik Evan b'markulis tanan. It says that a person throws the stone b'markulis, afagav demechavin lemirgame, even though his intention is to stone it, that's considered the worshiping. Rashi says b'markulis atzmo lahakosa, you're throwing it at markulis itself in order to hit it. So Amar Lahu said, then he said to them, Ezel eshkala, so let me go and I'll take the stone away. Rashi says, Ishkal afagav shekvar, even though he already worshipped, ve'in heishavan l'davar, there's nothing to do to go back on that. Kaboy lemishkale kadei shelo tisnoa ba'avoda shelo, he wanted to take it away, that there shouldn't be any kind of hana with this avoda. He wanted to take away this particular stone. And so the Gemara says, when he said he wanted to take it away, Amrulei, they said to him, whether a person takes or gives, it doesn't matter. Even if he takes a stone away, the person is also liable, because every single one that's taken away, it actually leaves a space for a new stone. As Rashi says, that gives another place for people to throw, and therefore that would also not rectify the situation. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hanosin mizaro lamolech, if somebody gives his child over to the molech, to the priests of the molech, eino chayiv ad sheyimsor lamolech v'yavor ba'esh, the person is only chayiv when he gives over his child to the priests of the molech and they pass the child through fire. Masor lamolech v'lo hever ba'esh, if he gives it over to the molech but they don't pass the child through the fire, or hever ba'esh, or they pass the child through the fire, v'lo masor lamolech, but he wasn't given over to the priests of the molech, eino chayiv, that's not enough to be liable. Ad sheyimsor lamolech, it has to be that he gives over the child to the priest of the molech, and also they pass him through fire. And Rashi says, Sheyimsar lamolech mosro biyad mishorse avodah zarah, means again those who are the priests of the avodah zarah, he gives the child over to them, v'yavir ba'esh, and then passes the child through fire. B'gemar mefarish hechiav avdi, the Gemara will explain exactly what they did. V'yalfi mikroid the tarvayo b'in, and it's learned out from Psukim that both giving over and also passing through fire are required. And the Gemara says, Katani avodah zara v'katani molech. We have a Mishnah, the previous Mishnah talks about avodah zara in general, and here we have a Mishnah specifically talking about molech. And Rashi says, Katani masnisin. We have the Mishnah earlier that says, B'chayve skila avodah zara, talks about chayve skila. There's a liability, a death penalty of stoning by avodah zara, ba'an pei nafsha. That's a Mishnah by itself. Ha'oved avodah zara, one who worships avodah zara. V'katani molech. And over here we have a Mishnah specifically about molech. And as the Gemara will say, Alma molech lav b'chlal avodah zara. You see that according to our Mishnah, the molech is not really a kind of avodah zara. It's something distinct. The Torah had a separate warning regarding passing your child through the fire and giving your child over to the molech. V'nafgamina, the difference is, dim zavach v'kater lefanov. Let's say a person were to sacrifice or burn in front of the molech, so pater would be pater because it's not considered a standard avodah zara. By any avodah zara, zavach v'kiter is chayiv. That would not be true by molech. Inami, or another difference is, hever mizaru l'shar avodah zara. Let's say a person gives over his children to some other avodah zara, ve'in darka bekach, and that's not the normal way of serving that avodah zara, lo mechayiv. The person wouldn't be chayiv. The molech dafka kasav, because it's only by molech, meaning sheshmo molech. It has to specifically be that its name is molech. As the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yavin says, Tanan Kamando Amar, our Mishnah is following the one who says, Molech lav avodah zarah, that the molech is not an avodah zarah, it's a separate prohibition in the Torah. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Echad la molech ve'echad l'shar avodah zarah chayev. The first opinion, not like our Mishnah, says it doesn't matter if you give your children over to the molech or to any avodah zarah, you're actually chayev. Rashi says, Echad la molech ve'echad l'shar avodah zarah, heavier zaro, if he gives over his children to the molech or any avodah zara, chayiv he is chayiv, because kasavar molech nami avodah zara, because this Tana holds, not like our Mishnah, that the molech is an avodah zara. Now there was no need to have a separate warning in the Torah for serving molech in the normal fashion. That's already learned out from the way that the nations serve their idols. So why is this specified in the Torah according to this Tana? Rather, it must be to say to you, that even if it's shelo kedarka, even if you do this with some other avodah zarah, you're going to be chayiv. But again, according to the Tanakam of this brisa, we're going to say that molech is a kind of avodah zarah. But Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon Omer, Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon says he's going to say, like the Tana of our Mishnah, la molech chayiv. The pasuk means to say that only if you give over the child to the molech is chayiv, shelo lemolech pater. But giving over to some other avodah zarah is going to be pater. And Rashi says shelo lemolech pater the molech davka ksiv, because it's only molech shedarka bekach, which is the way to serve it in that fashion. V'lo misham avodah zarah azar olav. And this warning was not because of avodah zarah. Tahame echa yavdu nafka. That already would have been learned out from echa yavdu. Ela choku lahem. Rather, it was just a law for them. V'atorah hikbet al chok. And the Torah was makbid about this law, zeb b'skila, and said that you get stoned for it. Lafika chutzrach lichtov. That's why it was necessary to write this. And that's the opinion of Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, that molech is not avodah zarah. And again, that's also the opinion of our Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus, Amru davar echad, Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, and Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus, they both say the same thing, because Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus also says that molech is not avodah zarah. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, Hadam, and Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon is what we just said above. Again, molech is not avodah zarah. Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus, and what's Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus? The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus, Omer, Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus says, Mimnei tafsa Torah lashon molech. Why does the Torah have a language of molech? Kol hashim lichu aleim, anything that they make as a king over them, afilu tzror v'afilu kesam, even if it's a pebble, even if it's a toothpick. Rashi says, Kol sheim lichu aleim shakara shmo molech. As long as they call it molech, that is sufficient to violate the commandment. And the Gemara continues, Rava Amar, Rava says it's not exactly the same. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, and Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus don't completely agree, because molech aroi ika beinayu. The difference is, what if it's a temporary molech? Rashi says, Rava Amar, Rava says, Lo amru davar echad. They're not saying the same thing. The molech aroi ika beinayu. A temporary molech would be a difference between Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, and Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus. To go in tzror v'kesam, like the examples given by Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus. If you had a tzror or a kesam, you had a pebble, you had a piece of wood, she'eno roi lekach, which really isn't fit that you're going to serve in this fashion. But just for the moment, they made this like it's their king. To give the child over to this. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon lo mechayev. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, he would not say chayev in that case. Ela b'molech kavua ubad, has to be a molech that is permanent, that's firmly established, not one that is temporary. But Rebbe Chanina ben Antignus says it applies even to one that is temporary, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Dalid Amud Beis.